resolution is. And you get at it in your own strength for a few days, you know, and boy, you're succeeding. Man, I haven't had a bad thought about that person for 3 days. And then that person appears in front of you with their snide remarks and everything else, and whoa, you're right back down to where you were, because we are wretched people, and somebody else has to deliver us from this body of death, not ourselves. Religion teaches us to try to make ourselves good, to deliver ourselves from this body of death, but the Lord is teaching us that only He can deliver us from this body of death. So, are you there yet? I mean, this is a place you have to get to in your Christian growth, is to get to the point where you have tried every way you can to be good on your own. See, if you succeed, then you can take credit for it. And I've run into a lot of people that thought they succeeded, and they walk like a peacock, you know, their heads high, and they think they're really something, because they think they've succeeded at being good. But what they're doing is they're succeeded at covering up pretty well. But are you there yet? Have you realized the depth of the sinful corruption that is in each one of us? Have you realized that that's in you? Or have you allowed the world to fool you still and say, well, look at those other people. They're a lot worse than me. We were talking to somebody this weekend that was looking at other people and talking about how bad they were. And in this case, who he was talking about happened to be homosexuals. But what he didn't realize is we're all sinners.
That's true.
Homosexuality is not a sin. It is a sin. I mean, the act of it. But so is all the things that we do and think. And we're all sinners. How dare we stand up? That's the reason that the Lord in the Gospels told the Jews not to judge. And He says, because what you're judging them on, you got the same thing. I used to wonder, could that be possible? That the very same thing that it's not the same thing. Down deep, it is the same thing. Down deep, we're all selfish, sinful people that want our way. Tell me it's not. Tell me that between a husband and a wife, when there's an argument, it isn't because you're each trying to have your way.
It's the woman's fault.
Do you still think that all you need is a little tweaking? You know, I mean, I'm pretty good. You know, it's too bad that Jesus went to all the trouble of dying for me, because I really didn't need that much. I just need a little tweaking to get me better. Well, the answer to that is, if you believe that, just keep trying to make yourself good through your own strength and through your own effort, and see if you don't end up at exactly the same place that Paul did right here that he's describing to us, crying out to be delivered from this impossible condition. It's like the preacher, some of you have heard me talk about him, that moved into a new house next to a bohemian young man. And the bohemian young man had a lawnmower, and he was out mowing the lawn. And the preacher was on his brand new bicycle, riding the bicycle. But he didn't have a lawnmower, and he needed one. So they talked, and they made a deal, and they traded vehicles. And the preacher ended up with the lawnmower, and the bohemian young man ended up with that nice-looking bicycle, and he went riding. And the preacher was going to start that lawnmower and start mowing the lawn. After a while, the young man comes back on his bicycle, and he sees that preacher, he's just pulling and pulling and pulling, and he can't start the lawnmower. And he says to the young bohemian, he says, this doesn't work, I just can't start it. And the bohemian says to him that the key is that as you pull the cord, you have to cuss. You have to curse. If you curse as you pull the cords, it works. And the preacher says, I haven't cursed in 30 years. I'm a man of God. And the young man said, just keep pulling. It'll come back to you. And that's what we all got in us. It's in us. Don't think because you found a good way to cover it up and get it under control. It's not there. The young man was smarter than the preacher. He knew the truth in that situation. You just keep getting into those situations, and it'll come back to you. So, or the lady that we had some spiritual discussions with, and she made the statement because we were talking about the grace of God, and she says, but you have to obey. You have to obey. And Annette said, but I can't obey. And the lady was shocked. How could it be? Now, I'm not too sure if she was shocked because she believed everybody obeyed, or she was just shocked because Annette was willing to admit it. You know, I'm not too sure. But the only way to even think that is there's only two ways. One is you lower your standards. In other words, God really doesn't, there's a lot of sins that are okay with Him. You know, little white lies, things to keep you out of trouble, all those kind of things. You lower your standards. And you lower your standards mainly by comparing yourself to people that are worse. I mean, everybody you run into that has judgment in their hearts, ask them where they draw the line. And you'll notice that it's below them. You know, everybody's below them is bad. And everybody that's them on up is good. You know, and they're the good people. And everybody else is the bad people. So one way you get away with fooling yourself and making you think that you really are obeying God all the time, which is what you have to do, by the way, because if you're under the law, you have to obey every single law. If you fail at one, you failed at them all. So that's the standard you put yourself. Or, if you don't lower the standards, you have to raise the self-deceit that is in you. In other words, you've really fooled yourself into thinking that you are a good person. And that everything in you is really good, and you've whipped it. You've got this. My question about this lady when she's saying it, now she had a reason for saying it. She had been raising a child and telling that child to obey. And now she brought him to this group here, which is telling him that you don't have to obey, you know. So she had an ulterior motive for fighting it. But didn't she know herself? Couldn't she, when Annette said, well, I can't, could she say, well, I can't either. But the point I want to make is that I try. And that's okay, you know. But let's tell the truth. Let's tell the truth. So let's go to Jeremiah. We're going to be back up here in Romans, but Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 9. Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 9, where the Lord tells us through the prophet Jeremiah, He says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Now, there was somebody in here that asked me the other day, how can you tell when something is a principle versus when something maybe is a direct instruction to a certain group of people or to one person, like in the case of Adam. And here's a principle. He's not talking about the Jewish heart or the male heart. He's talking about the heart. And he's saying that our heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? So, when I first read that, I thought, well, my heart isn't that deceitful. I'm only deceitful when I need to be. You know, I confine it to the times that it'll do something. But the biggest way our heart is deceitful is we fool ourselves. You know, is we rationalize. We rationalize away, well, I had to do that because, and we have an excuse for it. So that's one way, it's rationalizing. And the other way is the comparative means of making ourselves feel okay. Well, okay, so I do a couple of things bad, but it doesn't really count because look at the people that are really bad. Those are the ones God's going to... If you think you measure up, you're either lowering the standards or you're deceiving yourself. And our heart is real good at deceiving ourselves. Let's go back to Romans chapter 7, verse 25.